Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We've seen Pakistan's diplomatic efforts. We've also seen recently the delegation that was led by the efforts that were led by the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and we saw the delegation led by Bilawal Bhutto Zardari that of course Pakistan's narrative into the world, the way that it was Pakistan told its own story to the world, of course, in the wake of Indian propaganda that we saw. We'll be talking about that and, of course, how that propaganda is continuing even as we speak, whether it's about the visit of the COS to the United States, whether it's about the way that the war ended, whether it's about calling statements by the President of the United States as inaccurate. All of that continues relentlessly. We have with us Senator Bushra Anjum from the PML-N, who was part of the delegation. Thank you so much for being with us. Bushra, can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you, Mahrukh. Can you hear me?
Ji, I can hear you. Bushra, you were part of the delegation that was led by Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. First of all, congratulations on, of course, putting our story forward so aptly. And of course, we saw the efforts that were made by the delegation. Could you tell us a little bit about how Pakistan was received overall and how what we have to say was taken all over?
Sure. So, Mahrukh, basically, this was the brainchild of the Prime Minister, and I think this was much needed because, as you were mentioning earlier on, the negative propaganda that India is constantly promoting, whether it has to be about the war, whether it has to be about Indus Water Treaty, this era of misinformation and disinformation that India is creating a lot of chaos in the world, and the world agreed with us wherever we went. So we started off with the UN because mainly our focus was on Indus Water Treaty, on Kashmir, on war, and regarding this false propaganda, this false information, news that India is spreading and creating a lot of chaos. So we went to the UN and there was a delegation. While our delegation was there, Indian delegation was there as well. But they did not meet up with the UN personnel, and we could see that in their body language that they did not like the fact, because you see, treaties are a bilateral agreement and no one party can just walk out of it. And our point was very much clear that India has been negating the treaty for the past 2.5 years, and now outrightly they are saying that we do not believe in this treaty. So having said that, what we wanted was, we were very clear with the message. We were there with the message of peace, but peace with responsibility. And we were very clear over the fact that do not take our peace as any sign of weakness, because obviously our armed forces have very clearly shown the world that what we are capable of. Yet again, with all this force and might, we still believe in talks. We still believe in bilateral or multilateral talks with concerned personnel. So we got a very positive response as far as UN is concerned. Then we moved.
When you talk about the UN overall, we've seen, like you said, of course, walking out of bilateral treaty is certainly something that the world looks down upon, and it's not a part of any, any tenet of international law. But overall, in terms of the way that the Indian delegation conducted itself, there was a lot of, again, hate mongering has continued relentlessly. And do you think that the world acknowledges the difference between what Pakistan is trying to say and the way and the way in which we are trying to say it? Because we saw the war, we saw what the media coverage in the war, and we've seen what's happening after also relentlessly. Did you notice a difference on ground with the way that the people, were opening up to what was being said by the Pakistani delegation versus the way that the Indian delegation was going ahead?
You see, totally they agreed with us, because whatever we had to say, whatever message we wanted to bring on table, we had factual data. For example, if we said that we found footings of Indian personnel regarding that Balochistan train attack, the armed forces, everyone showed the results, showed the facts. India, on the other hand, was just spreading news and propaganda, and they had no factual data. And we explained to them, and everybody on media actually knows that the Prime Minister was the first one to say that let's have a transparent third-party investigation. We're open for that. But you do not put allegations on another country and start bombing them. So you see, everybody agrees with us. And Mahrukh, to be very honest, if this Indus Water Treaty holds no ground, even UN knows that any country, then there's no whole grounding for any treaty for that matter. You get my point. So this is setting up precedent which will not set well. So UN was of the opinion that yes, India has to come on table and talk about it because they cannot step out of a bilateral agreement. So having said that, moving on, we went to Washington. We had a couple of meetings at the Capitol Hill as well. We had a few meetings with the think tank as well, with international press as well, international media as well. And whatever we had to say made sense because you see, everybody could see that Indian government, Modi with his hate speech and constant throughout the war. Our main point was, the war was chaotic as it is, but creating all this misinformation and disinformation was creating a havoc for international media as well. So they were like, when the war was there, we couldn't sleep for 6 hours because we were just trying to catch up with what Indian media had to say and then what Pakistanis had to say. So yes, there was a lot to take with the international community as well.
Bushra, I'm going to interject here. Overall, in terms of the, like you said, the misinformation and the disinformation, unfortunately, it still continues as we speak. And we've seen that the statement of the US president, the way that India has tried to refute it. We've seen, Modi categorically come out and say, well, there was, no mediation, there was no, that India decided itself to sort of backtrack on the war. Do you think that inaccuracy and a flood of inaccuracies that we've seen, the misstatements that we've seen from the Indian sides, were those pointed out, were those, things that the world has acknowledged and seen, up front?
National diplomacy is one thing that nobody will take sides, right? Nobody will outrightly say that, oh, you're right and India's wrong. But, their gestures, their body language, and then the kind of actions that you can see, the army chief meeting Trump, that's happening for the first time, right? And then Trump passing statements which are in favor of Pakistan. And because we were very clear that we are very thankful for Trump to come as a mediator and actually materialize this ceasefire. But what we refer to as ceasefire, Modi is constantly referring to it as a pause. So you see, somewhat that was not sitting well with the Trump government as well, because you see America's power is being questioned there. So now you can see that the tilt is toward Pakistan. But if you say international diplomacy, somebody will sit and side by one country and negate the other. India being bigger in size, bigger in economy, has more to offer. So I don't think anybody would outrightly say it, but yes, their actions speak louder than words. So we can see favorable comments, our name was not put up in FATF as well. India, on the other hand, was, our mission was all about a narrative which was promoting peace in the region, right? Because if there's war between India and Pakistan, then obviously the whole region gets affected, because if India tries to stop our water, then China has outrightly said that if you stop their water, we will stop yours. So the whole region will get affected. But you can see a lot that is happening. Then while we were getting the next installment of IMF, India tried its level best to stop that. That didn't happen. So in so many words, we can see that the tilt is towards us.
But Bushra, do you see this, like you said, of course, diplomacy is an ongoing process. Do you see more proactive diplomacy on the cards for Pakistan? Because of course, like you said, there is a clear tilt also, and there's a clear body language when interacting. I'm sure you experienced it firsthand with the world and the UN also, and globally, of what Pakistan is trying to say, and the facade that is painted by India, the false kind of canvas is it's certainly been dented. And do you think that will continue? Are there plans to have this kind of diplomacy continue firsthand by Pakistan?
What I see in the turn of events that now Iran and Iraq is like Israel are at war, right? And Pakistan is considered to have a very strong army and a very strong pull and a strong say in for Iran, right? So I generally feel that Pakistan is getting more and more importance and strength by the day by looking at the events. This is my personal observation. I could be wrong as well, but yes, I feel that somebody questioning America, and outrightly you can see that Modi is doing that. And secondly, if you see that within India itself and their own opposition party members, even though Indian media is very controlled, so but you still get to see that it's not sitting well, and Modi is losing power day by day. So, and then this war happening, and then the army chief going, and then army chief being asked. So, a lot is happening that is falling in favor of Pakistan, and it's just supporting and promoting because everybody knows Pakistan is all about peace. So now Pakistan is being asked to be a mediator in somewhat capacity. So I think this is all working in the right direction, and it's strengthening the cause, it's strengthening the power, the position of Pakistan, and you will see in the coming days the kind of response that we were getting at Capitol Hill with all the congressmen, congresswomen, with the think tanks, even in UK. We had a very detailed meeting with the speaker as well, and we had with the Kashmir committee there as well. So we see a lot of progress happening, and the kind of response we were getting from everyone was a very positive one. And I mean, we could see that whatever we had to bring to the table, we were being sided by, and they did agree with us that yes. And what India is doing is making it's actually challenging its own credibility, and this whole misinformation and creating chaos and all of that is not sitting well, and it's not in his favor. So India is, I feel India is isolating itself, and very soon you will see the results as well.
Right. Thank you so much, Bushra. Thank you for your time. Thank you for updating us, on what happened and your delegation in its efforts regard. We have Dr. Ahmed Zaki, who's an expert on Middle East. Can you hear me? Dr. Ahmed, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Dr. Ahmed, I want to move on and talk about the situation at this time between, what's happening with Israel and Iran at this time. We're also looking at a lot of, as far as Iran is concerned, it's also, made statements about third parties' intervention. It's also, we are looking at a lot of escalation. How do you see things at this time?
As you know, it's been the 7th or 8th day of the war that between Israel and Iran, the exchange of the missiles which affects both nations, the diplomatic efforts from Arab nations and from the European countries are still under consideration. America is not clear on their point of the war, whether they are going to join or they are going to choose diplomatic interactions with Iran. The clear point is here that the aggression part of Israel, who are directly attacking the Iranian sovereign nation, and Iran is just responding to whatever the aggressor is doing against their nation. So in this condition, the world is in the brink of the Middle East war, which can affect mostly in the oil-rich Arab countries where the Americans have faced if America intervenes this war as militarily. That's why they are still trying to resolve this in a diplomatic way, but still their diplomatic effort is not like acceptable on the eyes of Iranian administration.
Overall, in terms of the kind of statements that are coming from the US, do you think that there's a possibility of some kind of perhaps an intervention at this stage, or do you think that it's too late for that now?
America was, for the last 10 to 15 years, they were trying to put a lot of pressure on Iran, particularly in their nuclear program, where Iran is completely denying that they are interested. They are not making any nuclear bomb On the other hand, they have a right to have a nuclear development program for their economic development. But America and Israel, particularly, they don't want to trust that on Iran. However, the IAEA, those who are responsible for atomic energy, they checked multiple times on Iran. They didn't found any sort of enrichment of uranium more than the development program. But last few days before the Israel attack to Iran, they said that Iranian enrichment of the uranium is more than what we were expecting. It should have to be like they crossed the limit that have been bound for the development of the nuclear development of civilian. On the other hand, the efforts of the diplomatic efforts which is going on from the American side, it's not acceptable for Israel, for Iran, because Iran is saying that as long as you are using military power, empowering Israel to attack Iran, we are not willing to have any negotiations with America directly, because they were already talking to America. There was already 5 rounds of diplomatic efforts which have not been produced any sort of uh, uh, convincing conclusion from both sides. On the other hand, Israel, they were the one who were willing to have American boots on the ground of Iran. That is where the conflict now lies on.
Dr. Ahmed Zaki, please stay with us. I'm going to go to Dr. Adnan Sarwar and then I'll come back to you. Dr. Adnan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Dr. Adnan, there's a lot that is being said. We've spoken about this, of course, before, but in terms of the regime change within Iran, and what we are looking at in terms of globally, the intel that's coming in, the information that's coming in, there's also, it is being said that there seems to be by and large more unity within Iran in the post escalation era at this time, as we look at the situation where things have escalated, but there seems to be inside Iran more unity instead of a fragmentation, which was what was expected. What is your opinion on that?
Thank you very much for your question. Well, as the matter of regime change is concerned, well, this is quite unlikely, because even the Russians also have said openly now that the beating by Israel of the Iranian leadership very unjustly is going to further cement the Iranian nation and would glue it to the leadership. Because this is quite natural to believe that in such a situation, when the regime is up against a very, very aggressive and truly aggressive state like Israel, how they would just leave aside their top leadership and abandon it. This is just not at all believable. So I am sure that now, you see, the irony is that Israel particularly is changing its stances. Now that they have realized that this may not happen, even if they import some personality from outside, as it has been talked about the son of former Shah of Iran, this will be totally a failure, because that person would not be owned and possessed by the Iranian people at large, and that the people, I think, very soon would be ousted, and anyone else in his place. So therefore, now they are saying that their main target is the nuclear sites, etc., which is a serious danger to the existence of Israel. But now, you know that today's special session of the United Nations Security Council was held a couple of minutes ago, and in which you see the Security Council Secretary General has called for giving a chance to peace, and that this is a big trust. And he has openly said that Iran has time and again assured the world, everybody who is concerned with it, that it is not making a bomb-grade enrichment program. So I think from the platform of the United Nations Secretary General, if this has been so assertively stated, then the question is, and Mr. Grossi also, the chief of the IAEA, has also been repeating it. So it's very, very unfortunate and full of lies that Israel has its own calculations. I mean, are they the chief of the IAEA? But if they believe it and United Nations Secretary General believes it, so this means that Israel is just up.
Dr. Adnan, do you see it contained? I mean, do you see, we've spoken about this, how, it does have wider regional consequences. Do you think that, it is possible for this conflict to be contained? Because, of course, now we are talking about nuclear sites, we are talking about the kind of escalation that we've seen in the last few days. Do you think that there's a possibility that this can be contained?
Well, I now very much think about it. At least you see, even if it is not an immediate prospect. But because very courageously, I would say, and in a great resilience, Iranians have stood up to the aggression, all sorts of the deadliest, most weapons from the air by Israel, the best of the best that they have from the advanced countries like US, Germany, Britain, etc., so on and so forth. You see, I think now Israel would be scratching its head, and its supporters of E3 also, and United States, that this is going to be a long drawn war in which the loss of Israel also, which it is now facing on the very
because it was also, we know that it seems that Israel itself also cannot afford a stretched out conflict of this kind between, Israel and Iran. And do you think that, it was perhaps taken by surprise with the kind of resilience like you mentioned, and the kind of comeback that Iran has shown, and maybe they don't have that kind of, they weren't anticipating the kind of reaction that we've seen from the Iranian side?
Yes, you're very right. You see the resilience and composure, I would say. I would emphasize on the composure also, that though you see their military commanders and scientists have been very wantonly killed by Israel, still you see their, the kind of discipline that they have been maintaining. Just switching over the leadership, no fear, no confusion at all, and in a very sober manner, and they have now hit back. And they are hitting back quite hardly, which was, not at all expected by Israel, that its the air defense system would fall. So this Iran has shown to the world that it has a power to be reckoned with, though you see it doesn't have those kinds of advanced weapons at all with it, which are with Israel. But still, you see, the world has been taken aback. And I would say that it is this situation. And yes, one more thing, you see, even if they face further casualties, we have to understand this very clearly. Their model is Karbala. And they believe in rendering the ultimate sacrifices. So if one nation's ultimate ideal is Karbala,
like you said, right? Dr. Adnan, I'll come back to you on that. Let me go back to Dr. Ahmed Zaki. Dr. Ahmed, I think something that Dr. Adnan mentioned, of course, in terms of the resilience that we've seen from the Iranian side, as far as the US is concerned, the statements that we've seen from the President of the US at this time are non-committal. Would you agree with that? I mean, we don't know. I mean, the extent of the US involvement, or whether it will continue, what kind of a US involvement are we looking at, and how much of it's still unclear, right?
An American intention of interference of this war is not clear, and it's still not clear what they want to do about it. There are two scenarios. If I clearly hear you, I think there's a signal issue of the voices breaking down. But from my end, let me clear one point here. In American perspective, there are two major powers inside the White House. which are affecting and influencing the American foreign policy decisions. Number one is that Americans who give a vote to President Trump, they were against war on foreign countries, but particularly their soldiers should not involve any war which is not beneficial, particularly for America first, then any other allies they want to support on it. And there are another part of his politicians and the White House influencers. They said that they have received billions of dollars from Israeli lobbies in America, and they are the one who want to rid of from the Iranian administration, particularly the supreme leader of Iran, which they see that as a existential threat for their agenda in Middle East. They want Israel should be the king of the Middle East. They do whatever they want, and there shouldn't be any sort of resistance whatsoever, and any country who can undermine their influence in the Middle East. So wherever they see as a threat to their influence in the Middle East, they are seen as a threat, and that is being financed by the Israeli lobbies in Washington. Because of that, American president is between the two major powers who are influencing his political decisions, and they are in 50-50. In one way or another, they are going to support Israel, whether they are going to only stay with the defenses. They are now defending Israelis against the Iranian missiles. It's not that America is completely out of the picture of the war, but we don't know at what time they are going to join the offensive part of the war, where they are expecting that this offensive will be beneficial for Israel. Let me give one clear point on the history. There is no aggression, any aggressor who's going to influence in our win. So every person who come to the to your land to attack you, they will never win against you, because the aggressors always go back with empty-handed. American interventions of Iraq, American interventions of Libya, American interventions of the latest one which we have seen in Afghanistan, and now it's Israelis who are trying to drag American armies into a local war of Iran. That's going to be devastating for Israel and Iran, and they're not going to reach the goal which they want to like control the administration of Iran easily, unless they are going to take a lot of loss in their shoulders.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed Zaki. Thank you for your very valuable input. Thank you for joining us from the Middle East. I will now go to Dr. Adnan. Dr. Adnan, we were, as far as the US is concerned, I think some of it Dr. Zaki spoke about, but the statements that we've seen, in your opinion, do you think, how the stance as far as the US is concerned? Because like I said, the involvement and the degree of involvement of the US in this conflict remains largely unclear. Isn't that true?
Well, it is such a matter which is, to me, it is not confusing. Because the United States of America's statements from the top level and that of the President of the United States have always been in support of Israel against Iran, and they have been saying that Israel is their red line in the region, and they are going to fully protect Israel, and they are rushing new and newer arms to it. So I would say involvement is already there, and since Gaza it has been there. I mean, if they were not stopping the Israeli leadership from butchering the civilians in Gaza, even if itself was not bombing, so what was that? That was a clear siding with the brutalists. But I would say that yesterday when the press secretary of the White House stated in the evening that Trump would not would decide, in fact, its actual participation in terms of joining of the armed forces, Air Force, etc., in 2 weeks. So I got this idea that probably Trump is now weighing his options, and the warnings from Russia and In fact, I would here also mention the meeting of our Field Marshal with the President Trump, in which he had showed his displeasure over Iranian situation and aggression against it, and that Trump said he heard from the army chief, the Field Marshal, that they were not happy about it. So I think now Trump is giving 2 weeks so that either E3 succeeds, or United Nations Security Council succeeds, or the international community succeeds, and somehow ceasefire even temporarily occurs. So for the while, I think Trump has started giving serious thoughts about its involvement, and that its involvement would further highly aggravate the area.
Right, fair enough. Thank you so much, Dr. Adnan Sarwar. Always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go to Jauhar Saleem, who's a former Foreign Secretary and President IRS. Thank you for joining us. Jauhar Saab, can you hear me?
Ji, I can hear you.
Jauhar Saab, I want to come a little bit to the meeting of the COS and the President of the US. A lot is being said across the border also. You know, we're looking at a propaganda machinery, you know, at this time in full play against Pakistan. There's a lot of colors, there's a lot of interpretations that are being given to this meeting. That of course reeks of malice, it reeks of you know what, the false perception that is being created. How do you look at this, and you know, and do you think that it's self defeatist, this kind of propaganda that is being put forward?
Well, it's not surprising that a lot of malicious propaganda is coming from India, because, you know, already the two countries are engaged in a war of narratives, so to speak, and they are not really having a great deal of success in it, despite sending a big delegation, a 40-member delegation around the world, headed by one of the brilliant orators like Shashi Tharoor that they have. So that is but I think it's also a diplomatic snub for India, because Modi had been negating President Trump in the last many days and weeks now, in terms of President Trump's contribution to the ceasefire between two nuclear states, Pakistan and India, in a conflict that could have led to a nuclear exchange. And President Trump regards it as a big victory because he spent a lot of political capital on that. You know, America has a lot of strategic clout, a great deal of strategic clout in the world. And of course, when they invest that on some issue, they want to be appreciated. It is understandable. But instead of appreciation, what they have received from India, whom they considered a strategic partner, probably still they do, because India has an important role in the Indo-Pacific strategy, the so-called Indo-Pacific strategy, because we believe it's a misnomer. But it is their China containment strategy, and it's very important for America and for the West. And India has a pivotal position within that. But despite that, we have seen that during this conflict, and
also, you know, I'm going to interject. As far as this is, you know, this of course, like you said, it's not surprising, one, and of course, you know, in a sense, it's self-defeatist, because we are looking at, like you said, you know, two narratives that the world is seeing. But I want your opinion on the statement that has come from Modi himself on this war and the escalation. And the contradiction of it that we've seen with the US president saying categorically that he is responsible for stopping a nuclear war between two nuclear nations of, you know, the magnitude of Pakistan and India. And we've seen the statement that Modi has made negating that. How do you look at this? Is it you know, openly a lie? How is it, you know, going to be looked at diplomatically?
And the problem India is facing is because they have been pretending to be a great power, and they want to be dehyphenated from Pakistan. Over the years, they thought they had been successful in doing that. And over the years, they felt that they are now the hegemonic power in South Asia. And with America's pat on their back, they could sort of, you know, like do things that they couldn't do before. But that intent and that sort of strategy has been defeated in the recent conflict. The befitting and very adequate response by Pakistan, first of all, it set India back in terms of its international clout. And secondly, India did not want to accept or admit the US role. Why? Because that in India's imagination or its perception, that would belittle India, as if India is one of those countries that the US, as it's an equal country to Pakistan, which the US, in some ways.
But is it common in diplomatic norms to make these kind of, to make this kind of an absolute misstatement, or to negate this, the statement that's come from the Oval Office like this? Is it part of, I mean, is this part of course? Is this something that the, is expected from any nation, really?
It doesn't happen very often when we're talking about two countries who are strategic allies and very, very close friends right now. India, you would recall that Modi was invited as one of the first 4 or 5 leaders when President Trump took over. And a lot of people would still recall the so-called bromance that they enjoyed. Modi once invited President Trump, and he actually made an appearance there in a political rally of Indian diaspora in the US. And so he was always boasting and touting his bromance or his rapport with Trump. And I think what the mistake that they made, and that has been a cardinal mistake, I would say, that they started taking the US for granted, keeping sort of, in mind that at least there was a feeling in India that because we have such a pivotal position in India's US strategy of containment of China, so they do not have a choice but to go along what we call our strategic autonomy, and we have to go along what we believe is our natural right to be the hegemon in South Asia. But when the US took a more sort of impartial position during this conflict and took a position of somebody who's in some ways advising India to do the right thing, because they were acting irresponsibly, and on the contrary, Pakistan was acting quite responsibly. And Pakistan was very receptive to all the endeavors for ending that conflict and moving towards some sort of a constructive dialogue, a meaningful dialogue, whereby the two countries, the two enduring rivals.
We've also seen, one has to acknowledge, even as we look at this meeting and, we see the way that, of course, the COS was invited, the way he has handled this meeting overall, that there is a checkered history between the US and Pakistan. Do you see a new chapter unfolding for us on all fronts, after this meeting and the way that we've seen the statements that have come from the President of the United States?
Yeah, you're right. Definitely, there has been sort of, a lot of fluctuations of sort of a checkered history, like you said. There have been phases where the two countries have been very close and strategic allies, and sort of and shared a very important common purpose. And there have been phases that has not been the case. I think in recent times there's a realization is growing in the US that Pakistan is still relevant, it's still important, particularly in the context of South Asia. And also the realization that in sort of, getting too close to India, in sort of, the strategic partnership that they're developing with India, ignoring Pakistan would be a great mistake, because then Pakistan would have no choice but to then delve deeper into the, as per the American perception, the Chinese camp. So that is there. Then there are other commonalities, for instance, the greater US emphasis on the mining sector, where Pakistan has a great deal to offer in terms of potential for investment in critical minerals. Then there's the counterterrorism sector. That is an area where again, the great possibilities of cooperation, and there are threats which the two countries have from common enemies. For instance, the ISKP, and then Al-Qaeda is also re-emerging in Afghanistan, and there are other groups as well. And recently, Pakistan was able to nab a very high-value target for the US and hand it over. And America is very appreciative of that. And still, there are other areas. There's areas of economic cooperation. U.S. is still the biggest partner of Pakistan in terms of exports, and one of the biggest sources of remittances for Pakistan. And it has considerable influence in the world, in financial institutions such as World Bank and IMF. Pakistan is under an IMF program, and Pakistan is starting a $40 billion program with the World Bank for the next 10 years. And America has a great deal of influence in both these institutions. Then again, there's the question of like cooperation within international forums such as the United Nations and many other multilateral agencies. Then, although in recent times we have seen not as robust defense cooperation as had been the case 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, but the possibilities still exist.
Right. Thank you so much, Jauhar Saleem Saab. Thank you for your very valuable input. Thank you for joining us today. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for being with us, Bushra, Anjum. But thank you for joining us, Dr. Ahmed Zaki. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Adnan Sarwar. Thank you for joining us, Jauhar Saleem Saab. Thank you for being with us today. As far as when we look at this meeting between the COS and the President of the United States, the false narrative that is consistently being put forward from across the border, it certainly seems like a new chapter for the Pakistan and US and the relationship forward. Of course, Pakistan's acknowledgement of Pakistan as a major regional player is certainly, it's something that we've seen as far as from the US in terms of partnership on a global scale with regard to, of course, investment and trade. We were also looking at that. In terms of Pakistan and its image is concerned, of course, we've come across as an independent, dignified, peace-oriented nation, and the face of that as the COS and his recent interaction with the US President. We've seen that, and unfortunately, whether we get that kind of acknowledgement from across the border or the kind of vituperativeness that we've seen recently, it's hardly surprising. The question is that Pakistan is on its way forward with all major players with regard to relationships with the US, whether we look at the region, whether we look at China, whether we look at a major nation, that a major stakeholder within the region is concerned. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.